Look, nobody actually wakes up at 5 a.m., stoked to run in the rain or sit through a spreadsheet that looks like a digital migraine. If they say they do, they're probably selling you a lifestyle brand. We're wired by nature to hunt for comfort, snacks, and cheap dopamine hits. Arthur Schopenhauer, this old-school philosopher who didn't sugarcoat anything, basically said we are driven by this will, a raw, restless, blind urge that's never satisfied. It's like a hunger that never ends. You get the shoes you wanted, and 10 minutes later, you're bored and looking for the next thing. You're sitting on your couch, phone in hand, scrolling through videos of people being productive while your own laundry pile grows into a mountain. The problem is you're waiting to feel like doing it. You think that if you just watch one more motivational video, the spark will hit you and the work will become easy. But that's a trap. You're a slave to that restless will, and the will wants you to stay on the couch because it's safe and warm. Your brain is a survival machine, not a thriving machine. It views effort as a threat to your energy stores. So when you think about starting that project or hitting the gym, your brain sends out a distress signal. It creates a physical feeling of resistance, a heavy tightness in your chest, or a foggy laziness in your head. Think about the last time you had to do something you hated, like cleaning a grease-stained kitchen or finishing a boring report. You stood there looking at it, and your brain started throwing every excuse it had at the wall. I'll do it after I eat, or I'm too tired today, I'll be more efficient tomorrow. That's the will talking. It's trying to preserve the status quo. If you listen to it, you're letting a blind impulse run your life. You're not the pilot. You're just a passenger on a bus driven by a moody toddler. To break out of this, you have to stop negotiating with your brain. Negotiation is where discipline goes to die. The moment you start a dialogue with your laziness, you've already lost, because the brain is a master lawyer. It will always find a loophole to get you back to the couch. You solve this by treating your brain like a loud, complaining roommate. You hear the noise, you acknowledge the complaining, but you don't let it change the plan. You put your shoes on anyway. You open the laptop anyway. Schopenhauer taught that the will is the boss, and the intellect is just its servant. Usually your brain spends all its time finding smart reasons to do what your lazy impulses want. You have to flip that. Use your intellect to set the rules while you're feeling clear, and then refuse to let your feelings change them later. When you stop asking your feelings for permission, the will starts to lose its grip. The task stops being a mountain and just becomes a thing you're doing. You realize that the grind isn't the enemy. The thought of the grind is. Once you're 5 minutes into the work, the resistance usually vanishes. The friction is only at the starting line. By moving your body before your brain can protest, you bypass the will entirely. You don't need to like the work. You just need to do it until the noise in your head goes quiet. We're obsessed with the spark. But Schopenhauer pointed out that life basically swings like a pendulum between pain and boredom. When we don't have what we want, it hurts. When we finally get it, we're bored. Think about that project you've been putting off for weeks. You're stuck in the pain of thinking about how hard it is, how long it will take, and how much you'd rather be doing literally anything else. To fix that pain, you reach for your phone. You check your notifications, scroll through a feed, or watch a video of someone eating a giant burger. You're hunting for a quick hit of excitement to drown out the dread of the work. The problem is that these micro-distractions actually make your focus weaker and the work feel even more soul-crushingly dull. You're pumping your brain full of high-speed digital sugar. So when you finally look back at that black and white spreadsheet or that blank page, it looks like a desert. Your brain screams because the contrast is too high. You've conditioned yourself to need a constant stream of newness. And now anything that requires more than 10 seconds of attention feels like a prison sentence. You're caught in a loop where the cure for your boredom, the phone, the snacks, the noise, is actually the thing making the boredom unbearable. Schopenhauer believed that this constant striving for the next hit of pleasure is what keeps us miserable. He called it the vanity of existence. We keep trying to fill a bucket with a hole in the bottom. You think you're bored because the work is bad, but the truth is you're bored because your brain is overstimulated and spoiled. You're like a kid who's had too much candy and now refuses to eat dinner. The way out is to embrace the boredom instead of running from it. You have to starve the distraction monster. When you sit down to work, don't just try to focus. You have to actively kill the competition. Strip away the music, the podcasts, the extra browser tabs, and especially the phone. Put it in another room. Make your environment as boring as the work itself. If the only thing in front of you is the task and a white wall, your brain eventually hits a wall of its own. It will whine, it will itch, and it will try to convince you to go check the fridge for the 5th time. But if you stay in that seat and refuse to give it the sugar it wants, something weird happens. Your brain gets so starved for stimulation that the work, the very thing you were avoiding, becomes the most interesting thing in the room. Suddenly, solving that one math problem or writing that one paragraph feels like a relief. You've tricked the pendulum by making the discipline the only escape from total stillness. Think about being stuck in a waiting room with no phone and only a 10-year-old magazine about tractors. After 20 minutes of staring at the floor, you will read every single word in that magazine, and you'll actually find it kind of interesting. That's the boredom hack. You don't find motivation by adding excitement. You find it by removing the exits. You stop being a victim of the pendulum when you realize that boredom isn't an enemy to be feared. It's a tool to be used. When you make your world quiet enough, the dull work finally has a chance to speak. You solve the focus problem by making the work the only thing left to do. Most people think discipline is about adding more stress to your life. But it's actually about choosing which kind of suffering you want to deal with. Schopenhauer believed that existence is inherently full of struggle, so trying to avoid it is a loser's game. You can't escape pain. You can only trade one version of it for another. Imagine you're lying on your bed on a Sunday afternoon. You know you have a mountain of work, a messy room, or a conversation you've been avoiding. You choose to stay under the covers and scroll through your phone instead. You think you're choosing comfort, but you're actually choosing the suffering of regret. That regret isn't a sharp pain like a paper cut. It's a heavy, dirty, suffocating weight that sits in your chest. It's the feeling of knowing you're letting yourself down. You're lying there, but you're not actually resting. Your heart is racing, your mind is looping over all the things you aren't doing, and you feel like a passenger in your own life. This is the bad struggle. It's the pain that lingers, rots your self-esteem, and keeps you awake at 2 a.m. staring at the ceiling. You're trying to hide from the will, but the will is just punishing you with anxiety because you've given it nothing to chew on. The problem is we mistake doing nothing for peace. Schopenhauer argued that happiness is really just the temporary absence of pain. So if you choose the pain of laziness, you never actually get to the peace. You're just stuck in a slow-motion car crash of guilt. You solve this by trading that heavy, endless regret for the sharp sting of discipline. This is the good struggle. Think about the moment you finally get off the couch and start that hard workout or open that difficult project. It feels like a physical blow. Your lungs might burn, your brain might feel like it's grinding gears, and it's uncomfortable as hell. But here's the secret. That pain has an expiration date. It's a clean, honest kind of suffering. When you're at the gym and your muscles are screaming, or when you're forcing yourself to write that awkward email, it hurts in the moment. But the second the task is done, the sting vanishes. It leaves you with a sense of relief that the lazy version of you will never know. You realize that you didn't need a vacation or a miracle. You just needed to swap a long, dull ache for a short, sharp push. The next time you're faced with a choice, Don't ask yourself what will be easy. Ask yourself which pain you'd rather live with, the sharp, short sting of doing the work, or the heavy, soul-crushing weight of knowing you didn't. When you embrace the struggle as a natural part of being alive, you stop being a victim of your circumstances. You realize that true freedom isn't about having no problems. It's about picking the problems that make you stronger. You solve the paralysis of choice by realizing that no struggle isn't an option on the menu. Once you accept the sting, the work becomes the path to the only real peace there is. The biggest lie your brain tells you is that future you is going to be a superhero. You tell yourself that tomorrow morning you'll have 10 times the willpower you have right now. You imagine this version of yourself who wakes up perfectly rested, focused, and ready to dominate the world. This is what Schopenhauer would call a delusion of the intellect. It's a trick your brain plays to get you out of the discomfort of the present moment. You're staring at a sink full of crusty dishes, a pile of laundry that looks like a mountain, or a massive work report that's due, and you tell yourself you'll crush it after a good night's sleep. You feel a sense of relief just by making the plan. But that relief is a fake. The problem is this massive gap between your intentions and your reality. You are treating future you like a different person, someone who doesn't have your cravings, your tiredness, or your love for scrolling through social media. But here's the cold truth. Tomorrow morning, you are going to be the exact same person with the exact same lazy brain. You'll have the same excuses and the same will pulling you toward the path of least resistance. When tomorrow actually becomes now, that superhero you imagined is nowhere to be found. Instead, there's just you, feeling just as unmotivated as you did the night before, only now you're under more pressure because you wasted 24 hours. Think about how many times you've set an alarm for 6 a.m. with total confidence, only to hit snooze 5 times when the sun actually comes up. In the evening, your brain was playing a fantasy game. In the morning, the will took back the wheel. Schopenhauer argued that our intellect is often just a tool to justify what our inner urges want to do anyway. When you're tired at night, your intellect justifies laziness by calling it planning for tomorrow. It's a cycle of self-deception that keeps you stuck in the same place for years. You aren't failing because you lack talent. You're failing because you're waiting for a version of yourself that doesn't exist. To shut this down and get out of the loop, you have to kill the idea of tomorrow entirely. Stop viewing time as a long road and start seeing it as a series of no's. You have to act as if the version of you that exists 5 minutes from now is the only one who can save you. If you're procrastinating on a difficult conversation or a project, don't schedule it for next week as a way to feel productive without doing anything. Open the chat window or the document right now. Don't wait for the perfect conditions, because the will always find a reason why today isn't perfect. It's too hot, it's too cold, you didn't have enough coffee, or you have a slight headache. These are just the strings of the puppet master pulling at you. By the time your brain realizes what's happening and starts trying to talk you out of the work, you need to already be in the middle of it. You bypass the intellect's excuses by moving faster than your thoughts can form. When you stop negotiating with the future, you start owning the present. The only way to actually change your life is to realize that future you is a ghost, and the only person who can do the work is the unmotivated person sitting in your chair right this second. You solve the procrastination trap by realizing there is no later. There is only the choice you make right now. True discipline isn't about being a drill sergeant or hating your life. It's about what Schopenhauer called the denial of the will. It's the quiet, steady power to say no to the immediate animal urges that try to run your day. Think about a typical afternoon when you're trying to focus or eat better. Maybe someone brings a box of donuts into the break room, or that notification pings on your phone while you're in the middle of a tough task. The smell hits you, or the curiosity bites at you, and suddenly your brain is screaming that you need it. This isn't a logical thought. It's the will trying to hijack your body. It's that raw, blind hunger that Schopenhauer said is the root of all our suffering. It tells you that if you just have that one thing, that snack, that distraction, that hit of dopamine, you'll finally be happy. But we all know the truth. The happiness lasts about 5 seconds, and then the hunger comes back even stronger. The problem is that most of us try to fight this with willpower, which is like trying to hold back a flood with a leaky bucket. Willpower is a limited battery. It runs out when you're tired, stressed, or hungry. If you spend all day gritting your teeth and screaming, "Don't do it," at yourself, you eventually get exhausted and cave in. You feel like a failure because you couldn't force yourself to be disciplined. You're stuck in a war with your own head, and that war is draining the life out of you. You solve this by changing how you look at the urge. Instead of fighting it like an enemy, you observe it like a scientist. Schopenhauer believed that the only way to get free from the will is to step back and just look at it. The next time you feel that desperate need to procrastinate or grab that junk food, stop for a second. Don't say, "I can't have that." Instead, say, "My brain is having a craving right now." You realize that the feeling is just a temporary chemical flare-up in your nervous system. It's an itch that wants to be scratched, but the itch isn't you. When you realize that you aren't your impulses, the trick is over. You start to find a strange kind of peace in the word no. It stops being a punishment and starts being a shield. Every time you say no to a useless distraction, you're actually saying yes to your own freedom. You're proving to yourself that you aren't a puppet being pulled by strings of desire. You're the one holding the scissors. The discipline stops being a chore and starts being your path to actual stillness. Schopenhauer said that as long as we are driven by our desires, we can never have lasting peace. We're like a beggar dreaming he's a king, only to wake up even hungrier. By practicing the no, you're waking up for real. You start to notice that after the urge passes, and it always passes, there's a quiet sense of strength left behind. You didn't give in, and the world didn't end. In fact, you feel lighter. You solve the struggle of self-control by realizing that you don't have to win the fight. You just have to stop stepping into the ring. When you stop being a slave to every little want, you finally get to find out who you actually are. Most people think the goal of discipline is to reach a place where they finally have it all. But Schopenhauer had a much darker, more realistic take. The more you chase, the more you suffer. He argued that our natural state is like a flickering lamp, constantly needing fuel just to stay lit. We spend our entire lives trying to fill a hole that has no bottom. You think that if you finally get that promotion, that body, or that bank account balance, you'll be able to park your car and relax forever. But the problem of the void is that the moment you stop struggling for something, boredom moves in like a heavy fog. You're sitting in your dream house and suddenly you're annoyed that the floorboards creak, or you're scrolling through travel sites because your current life feels like a cage. You're trapped in a cycle where you're either hurting because you want something or you're bored because you have it. This is the ultimate will to live trap. It makes you a hamster on a wheel that only spins faster the harder you run. You solve this by changing the goal of your discipline. Stop trying to work hard so you can arrive at some magical destination where you never have to work again. Instead, make the discipline itself the destination. Schopenhauer suggested that the only way to beat the system is to stop playing the game of more. You have to become a master of the void, someone who is okay with having nothing to chase. Think about a Saturday morning where you have zero plans. Usually, your brain starts itching within 20 minutes. You feel this weird pressure to do something or see someone. That's the will trying to drag you back into the race. It hates stillness, because in the stillness, you realize how empty the chase actually is. You break this by practicing voluntary poverty of the mind. This doesn't mean you have to sell your stuff and live in a cave, but it means you practice doing things that have zero reward at the end. You go for a walk without headphones, just to look at the trees. You sit in a chair for 10 minutes and just breathe, watching the thoughts fly by like annoying flies. When you learn to handle the void without reaching for a phone or a snack, you become bulletproof. The world loses its power to tempt you because you've already found a way to be okay with nothing. This is the highest form of discipline. It's not about being a hustler. It's about being a stable person in a world that is losing its mind, trying to find the next thrill. You realize that most of the things people kill themselves to get are just shining bubbles that pop the second you touch them. By leaning into the quiet and the nothingness, you stop being a victim of your own ambition. You start to see that the peace you were looking for at the end of the marathon was actually available at the starting line, if you just stopped running. You solve the endless hunger by realizing that you are already full. The discipline isn't a tool to get stuff. It's a tool to strip away the stuff until all that's left is a version of you that doesn't need anything to be okay. If you're ready to stop being a slave, drop a comment below and tell me which clean pain you're choosing today. Are you hitting the gym, finishing that project, or finally cleaning that disaster of a room? Hit that subscribe button and start mastering the void. Go do it anyway.